Hi students, I've asked you to respond to me in an email, so please make sure you have a browser tab open with an email ready to go. And the first thing I'd like you to do is spend some time really looking at this image. So once I'm done instructing you, I want you to pause this and really look close at this. Zoom in on it if you have to. What I want you to do is describe what you see happening. So first, start by describing the whole image. What do you think is happening in this entire image? And then I want you to zoom in, and you're either doing that visually or you're quite literally zooming in to see what specific things are happening in this image with the figures, with the color, with anything else you can observe. So I recommend starting in one corner, so maybe the top left corner, working your way all the way across the top, and then all the way across the bottom of the image. Once you have completed that, you can replay this video and it will continue as in the next moment I will be telling you a bit about this image. So here's Picasso's Guernica. You can see the name here at the bottom. This was done by Pablo Picasso. Picasso, I'm sure a name you are familiar with, for the 1937 World's Fair. This piece is gigantic. It's 11.5 feet high by 25.5 feet wide. So I want to just let that size sink in for a moment. Think about how tall 11.5 feet is, presumably taller than whatever room you're in right now, and then 25.5 feet wide. I'm sure you noticed when you did your observations from the last slide we were just looking at that there appears to be a lot of violence happening in this image. So if let's just start, let's say, in the top left-hand corner, you have a bull, and that's a theme that Picasso carries often through his paintings, the image of the bull. That's a core image and mythology from Spain, his country of origin. And right beneath the bull, you see a woman in agony and total suffering with her head turned towards the sky, wailing, her breasts sagging beneath her, and in her arms lays her still baby, her very clearly dead baby. Right beneath the baby, you see what looks like some sort of knight or soldier toppled maybe off of his horse. If you look towards his midsection and out against where his arms stretches out to the right, right in the middle of the image, you see that he's clasping a broken sword. So all these images of horror. If we move further to the right, you can see there appears to be a monster. There's a character with its arms stretched into the air, and it looks like it's clenched in the jaws of a monster. When we make a circle continuing back towards the middle, so moving from that character with its arms stretched to the sky, directly to his left, we see a woman coming in through a window, this character reaching out a lantern, the symbol of hope, the symbol of light cast into a dark space. And right above that lantern, the image of the all-seeing eye, the eye glowing in the sky, this image of some sort of benevolent being watching, and inside of that is a light bulb. Again, the idea of casting light into dark spaces. This image was made by Picasso as a response to a terrible event. This was the bombing of a town in Basque Spain, northern Spain, by Nazis. And in this bombing, hundreds and hundreds of people were killed. The event was horrible. This town was leveled. And these were just everyday civilians. This was not a military base. This was an action taken by the Nazis to expressly practice the use of their new bombing technology for no other reason. In the rest of our short lecture today, I am just going to talk about a few more components and terminology that'll be important foundations for our work moving forward. The first is a term that you've surely heard before, the idea of symmetry. So if we look at this image of the Vitruvian Man by Da Vinci, again, this is an image that has probably been burned into your mind. This is such a heavy pop culture image. we see that there's a red line drawn down the middle. And the idea of symmetry is when things in an image are corresponding over an axis. So when you think about something that can be folded in half and each side would match, it doesn't mean it has to be perfect. You can see when we're looking at the Vitruvian man's feet that one foot is turned out a little more than the other. But roughly speaking, when we can fold something in half over an axis, that is a line of symmetry. And the idea of asymmetry is if we fold an image over that axis, whether we're folding it vertically or horizontally, the idea that it doesn't match, it doesn't have symmetry over the axis. This is an example of an asymmetrical image. There's no direction, whether you're going from corner to corner diagonally, from top to bottom vertically, from left to right horizontally. There's no way that this can be folded that the sides of the image will roughly correspond over an axis. Something that I really think it's important for you to know, both in reference to our course as well as reference to life as a whole, are things like deep background knowledge. Primary and secondary colors are one of those things. It's just something you should know, no matter what field you're working in, whether you're going to be a veterinarian, a police officer, or a surgeon, a graphic designer. This is just a core foundational piece of knowledge. So this is something I need you to commit to memory. The first set of colors we're going to talk about are the primary colors. And those are yellow, red, and blue. So these colors, yellow, red, and blue, are only available in nature. We cannot mix anything to create yellow, we cannot mix anything to create red, and we cannot mix anything to create blue. These are colors as they occur in nature, traditionally speaking. Now that we can use chemicals to make colors, we certainly can engineer these colors, but traditionally speaking, these colors are the core foundation building blocks, life blocks of color. So the secondary colors are products of two primary colors. So if we take blue and yellow, we get green. If we take yellow and red, we get orange. And if we take red and blue, we get purple. There's a final layer of colors, and those are called tertiary colors. And tertiary colors, this isn't something I'm asking you to commit to memory. Primary and secondary I am, but tertiary colors, not necessarily. It's something you probably should know, but for the purposes of our course, I just want to cover it. A tertiary color is when you mix a primary and a secondary color. So I'll give you some examples of that. If we mix a primary yellow and secondary color such as orange, we get the color red-orange. And again, if we mix orange and red, we get red-orange, and so on and so forth around our color wheel. This is the discus thrower from approximately 460 BCE. You can see that this figure has perfect everything, perfect hair, the perfect Greco-Roman nose, these bulging muscles. This is an athlete at the peak perfection. An image like this isn't realistic. We know that thinking about our modern beauty standards as well. The images that we see in magazines, they're polished, they're all photoshopped and airbrushed in order to make the image perfect. This wasn't any different with the ancient Greek people. And when we see an image like this, we call it idealized. So this object has been created and curated according to an accepted standard of beauty, not something that's necessarily grounded in what real humans would have looked like. This is an image by an artist named Delacroix. You can see his name on the bottom of this slide, Delacroix, from 1930. And the title of this is Liberty Leading the People. This is an image from the Second French Revolution. So when we talk about the French Revolution, we're talking about something that had happened several decades earlier, roughly contemporaneous with our own revolution here, our American Revolution. But this image is from a secondary revolution. You can see in the middle there is this giant figure, Lady Liberty. She is full heads taller than the other characters in this image. She's holding up the French flag, and she's literally trampling over the bodies of the enemies, the bodies of the deceased. Surrounding her is the horde of victors, these people seeking revolution, successful in revolution. On her left, a younger boy with guns ablazing. On her right, a man with a sword, another with a shotgun. This is not what war looks like. We now today have unfortunate frequent imagery of what the terrors of war actually look like. And we know it is not this. It is not this picture perfect cut and dry. The enemy is dead at the feet and the victors are successfully trampling over them. That concept is a romanticized concept. So romanticized meaning a romantic or hopeful portrayal, probably and possibly unrealistic and idealized. Romanticism as a movement, which we'll talk about in several weeks, is something that's geared more towards not the romantic love that we might think about now, but this idea of raw emotion, raw power that comes from honest expression of feelings. So in this case, we're talking about something that's romanticized, and we'll see this even with Egyptian art and ancient Greek art. Something that's romanticized is a romantic or hopeful portrayal, probably and possibly unrealistic. When we talk about naturalistic images or realistic images, we're talking about objects as we see them in nature, such as in this image. These are women working in a field. It looks like women working in a field. We can see the cows and the wagons in the background, the straw piled high. This is how it is. This is what it looks like. There's no way to interpret it necessarily, except for what we see is what we get. We'll see quite a bit of stylized art. So the idea of stylization is certain features are non-organic rather than being perfectly naturalistic, but we can also still recognize the figures. So in that last image, in a realistic or naturalized image, it looks exactly how you'd expect to look. A female figure, a picture of a building. When something is stylized, and sometimes we can even say abstract, and we'll talk about that term a little later, but something that's stylized or abstract is when figures are just slightly changed from the way people actually look. And if we pick one of these figures, let's say the figure all the way on the right of this image, you can see that their eye is flat on their head, even though we're looking at the side of their body. We can tell this is a human figure still, and that's what's important about the idea of stylized or abstract. We can still see what it is. We still know what it is, but it's been changed to maybe suit what is aesthetically pleasing for that period of time or movement. Also in this image is a term that will carry us quite a way. This is something you should definitely have in your notebooks, and something I'll be asking you about when we meet in our next class. And that is the term hierarchical scale. We see that employed in this image as well, where the largest of figures, the giantesses in this image, are these women sitting in their seats. We know that they are so large that if they stood up, they would be full heads taller than the figure all the way to the right. And then the next in the scale are the servants serving in the middle, the larger figure in the middle and all the way to the left, and then those tiny figures at the bottom. We are not seeing grown-ups and children here. We are seeing potentially goddesses. Maybe on the right is some sort of pharaoh, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the figure on the right is holding in their hand a name glyph, so that tells us that this is a person of royalty. And then the other figures are servants. In real life, these figures would have been if they were all humans, all the same size. So hierarchical scale is the concept that bigger is more important. Abstract art, much like stylistic, has recognizable imagery, but the figures are somehow distorted and not realistic. This is Picasso's The Women of Avignon, or The Ladies of Avignon. And you can see that we can tell that these are 5 women figures, but it's not quite how women look in real life. And we'll talk a little bit more about this piece specifically later in our semester. Kandinsky's imagery is what we call non-representational or non-figurative. There's many artists that work this way. Somebody else that comes to me right off the top of my head is Jackson Pollock. So he is a drip painter, an action painter. So his painting is just following the movement of his body on the ground. When he's done, there is nothing to represent a tree, a mountain, a person, a figure, a dog. It is just shapes and images. It doesn't mean that they don't have an intention or a meaning that they're trying to get you to understand, but it does not have any recognizable imagery in it. So if we look at this as a continuum, on the top left, we can see it's a cow, realistic or naturalistic. Just below that, it's a stylized or abstracted cow. You might or likely could probably pick out that was the artist's intention, but it does not realistically represent what a cow looks like. And then all the way on the bottom, this is a totally non-representational or non-figurative expression of a cow. We spoke briefly in our last class together about the idea of objective versus subjective. So an objective perspective is one that's not influenced by emotions, opinions, or personal feelings. It is a perspective based in fact that is quantifiable and measurable. So for instance, Van Gogh was frequently depressed, leading to his hospitalization several times. We know that this was true. There is no opinion in that statement. A subjective perspective is one open to greater interpretation based on personal feeling, emotion, or aesthetics. Van Gogh's depression made him a better artist by allowing him to express his deep emotions seamlessly through his art. I'll post this slide for you in our course module as well, but if you wanted to just copy it here, since you likely have your notebook out at this point, these are the terms just in one slide for you from our lecture from last week and this week.